Hi, it's Katrina. Number 15. The Golden Mummy. The Golden Boy mummy was found at a cemetery in southern Egypt in 1916. It got its nickname because of the unbelievable wealth the boy was buried with. His head mask was gilded in gold. The mummy was hidden inside of 2 coffins instead of 1, and he had more treasure than a boy could ever ask for. After his discovery, he was transferred to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where he was stored in the basement. It was only recently that researchers took a renewed interest in the boy mummy and decided to do computed tomography scans. Based on the results of the CT scans and by looking at his teeth, researchers identified the boy as being between 14 and 15 when he died 2,000 years ago. They say that because his wisdom teeth had never come in, he likely hadn't grown to adulthood. But the truly shocking discovery was that the Golden Boy had a hidden 49 amulets stashed on and inside of his body. What's even more bizarre is that whoever buried him also stuffed him full of gold. A golden heart scarab was placed inside his thoracic cavity, and a golden tongue was found in his mouth. Sahar Salim from Cairo University says the mummy is an amazing showcase of the Egyptian belief system during the Ptolemaic period. The boy must have been someone of extremely high status, from a family who could afford to bury him with the best. The amulets were placed in his coffin to protect him from supernatural evils, and he was given a gold tongue so that he could speak with the gods in the afterlife. He was even buried with a pair of expensive sandals so that he could walk out of his tomb once he passed on to the other side. Number 14. Cambrian Mystery. Animals living in the ocean conducted an experiment in evolution 500 million years ago. This was when creatures went from being squishy, tube-like organisms to having skeletons. Invertebrates that resembled living plants growing on the seafloor started to develop bone-like structures. It was one of the greatest evolutionary leaps in the history of life on Earth. However, not many of these early organisms have been found, making them a huge mystery to scientists. But recently, in China, some of them have been identified, and they date from between 541 and 510 million years ago. These are calcium-reinforced skeleton tubes from the Cambrian explosion. Scientists studying these bizarre remains have found that for a span of about 50 million years, multiple groups of animals suddenly evolved to have hard skeletons. You can thank these creatures for all the bones you have in your body today. These strange creatures found in China have been identified as a species of tube-dwelling animal called Gangtucunia aspera. Researchers were shocked when they realized the animal was a skeletal jellyfish. It was a soft-bodied invertebrate with a ring of tentacles around its mouth. The jellyfish only measured a few fractions of an inch, but still, it looks like it's one of the first animals ever to experiment with a bone structure. Number 13. The elephant on Mars. A strange and very unusual creature may have just been discovered on another planet. According to UFO hunters, specifically self-proclaimed alien researcher Scott Waring, an elephant-like animal has been sighted on Mars. Scott says he was studying an image of the red planet when he noticed something shocking between some rock formations. The picture itself came from NASA and is public for everyone to look at. Scott was analyzing the official photographs when he came across what he says. The statue appears to show the animal sitting with its head turned slightly to the left. It looks like it has thick lips and bulging eyes, and it seems to have a round nose and an elephant trunk. Scott says the statue is irrefutable proof that life on Mars did exist at one time, perhaps not that long ago. However, not everyone is convinced. Experts say the supposed statue is nothing but a rock formation, and that people just see what they want to see. Keep in mind, Scott Waring also once claimed that he found a monkey sitting on the surface of Mars, and then he bashed biologists for not investigating. While it's possible that there could be animal sculptures on Mars crafted by aliens thousands of years ago, NASA has never officially confirmed it. So as far as mainstream science is concerned, there has never been any undeniable proof of life found on the surface of Mars, never mind a statue of an elephant monster. Number 12. The unicorn blind fish. In the dark waters of a creepy Chinese cave, an extremely bizarre fish species has been discovered. Researchers are calling it a unicorn blind fish. These freakish creatures live in the black pools at the bottom of a remote Chinese cave and aren't like anything seen in the outside world. The fish has no scales, it doesn't have any kind of color, and its eyes are completely useless. But perhaps the weirdest thing about them is that each fish has a horn sticking out from its forehead. Researchers came across these unbelievable animals while surveying a cave in the mountains of Guizhou province. Scientists call it a case of regressive evolution. The fish still has eyes because at one point it didn't live in total darkness. It was likely a fish that lived in the sea, but through geological shifts, it found itself stuck in tiny pools of water underneath a mountain. Then, as its eyes began to fade and its color was lost, it started growing a horn for some unknown reason. Not too much else is known about these bizarre blind fish, but researchers are hoping to analyze its DNA to find out more about it in the near future. Number 11. A new planet. Scientists have just discovered a world very similar to our own. Using data compiled by NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS, scientists identified planet TOI 700e, which appears to be orbiting the habitable zone of its star. Earth is also located in the habitable zone of our solar system, close enough to the sun to be warm for liquid water to occur naturally. But if we were any further away from the sun, it would be too cold for liquid water, and if we were any closer, it would be too hot. The habitable zone is sometimes called the Goldilocks zone because it's perfect for the development of life, not too hot and not too cold. Planet TOI 700e is roughly 95% the size of Earth and appears to be mostly rocky. But here's where things get even more amazing. Emily Gilbert from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California says the TOI 700 system is remarkable, as there is not just one planet in the habitable zone, but several. TOI 700e is just the most recent one to be discovered, but planets B, C, and D are also in the sweet spot where life can occur. Imagine that instead of Mars being our neighbor, we had two other planets of almost identical size. It would mean that human beings could inhabit two other planets with relative ease. Unfortunately, star system TOI 700 is 100 light-years away, and it's not a place we're going to reach anytime soon for colonization. And now for number 10. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Ricky Workman and Rocky Atkins for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family, because why not? Number 10. The GAO Chang Observatory. The GAO Chang Astronomical Observatory is believed to be one of the oldest observatories of ancient China. We don't know all there is to know about it, but historians believe it was built around 1042 BC. It's believed that the Duke of Zhou had the observatory constructed for his royal astronomers to better observe the sun. Back then, the Duke thought the Henan province, the area where the observatory stands now, was located at the center of heaven and earth. The structure standing today, however, isn't the same one that was built 3,000 years ago. In 1276 AD, Kublai Khan ordered a great observatory to be built that could observe the movements of the sun and the stars, as well as record time. It was an immense creation and may have been built right on top of the original observatory. It was from here that ancient Chinese scientists calculated the length of the year to 365 days. They did this a whopping 300 years before Europeans had even started thinking about coming up with the Gregorian calendar. Number 9. Mystery signal from space. Scientists recently captured a signal that originated 9 billion light-years away from our planet. Astronomers had a difficult time wrapping their heads around the discovery because it was so shocking. The radio signal came from an ancient galaxy so far away that it takes approximately 8.8 billion years for the light it produces to reach us. What that means is that the radio signal we received is almost 9 billion years old, twice as old as our own planet. It was emitted at a time when our solar system hadn't even materialized yet. It took the entire formation of our star system and the evolution of every animal in the world before the signal finally got within range. Scientists say it's now the most distant signal of its kind ever picked up by human technology. It was discovered by the Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope in India. But just what in the world made this signal? Could it have been an extraterrestrial society that existed in the first few years of the creation of the universe? According to scientists, it's not very likely. Researchers from India believe the signal came from gaseous hydrogen and that it was emitted by a cluster of hydrogen atoms. But unfortunately, there is no way of knowing what this distant galaxy looks like today. If the signal was sent 8 billion years ago, chances are the galaxy was already swallowed by a black hole. However, just because the signal wasn't made by aliens doesn't mean we won't pick up an alien signal in the future. Many scientists believe that if there was an advanced civilization, they likely evolved many billions of years ago, far away from us, meaning their signals may not have reached us yet. Number 8. Egypt's oldest mummy. Archaeologists have discovered what they say could be the oldest Egyptian mummy ever. It's 4,300 years old and was uncovered at the bottom of a deep shaft near the mysterious step pyramid of Djoser. The tomb and the pyramids are inside the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, one of the most important sites in Egypt. Excavation leader Zahi Hawass, who happens to be a world-renowned Egyptologist, says the mummy was once a man named Hekashepes. His remains were discovered inside a limestone coffin that was sealed tightly with mortar. So far, it appears to be one of the oldest and most complete mummies ever uncovered in Egypt. Archaeologists know that he lived during the reign of the last pharaoh in the 5th dynasty, but it's not exactly clear who Hekashepes was. He doesn't seem to have had any royal connections, so he may have just been an ordinary person with enough cash to go through the mummification process. They also found other mummies nearby, including those of a high priest, a judge, and a senior official. It was a truly incredible discovery because all the mummies were identified by name. That's pretty great for historians. You had the high priest, the judge, and the senior official. All their tombs were decorated in murals and hieroglyphics, and each one was filled with a small assortment of tablets and statues. Number 7. Skull on the beach. A woman named Emily Stevenson discovered the remains of a human skull on a beach in the United Kingdom. Emily is the co-founder for the environmental group called Beach Guardians, and she was cleaning the shoreline of Cornwall, England, when she came across a human head. Probably not a great way to start the day. At first, the unexpected discovery was investigated by the local police. What if it was a homicide? However, they soon realized the skull wasn't from any modern person. It likely came from somebody who lived centuries ago. The skull had been on the beach for an untold number of years, and it may have belonged to a shipwreck victim. The Cornwall Council released a statement saying it's not that unusual to find human remains along the English coastline. Many people in centuries past were buried on the beach by seaside communities. This was especially true when there was a shipwreck and the victims washed ashore. When locals found the deceased sailors, there wasn't usually any way to identify them, and so they would bury them right there in the sand of the beach. The skull could have come from anyone. It could have been an explorer, a shipwreck victim, or even someone from a local community. However, because it's several hundred years old, there's a chance we'll never find out the truth. Number 6. Arthur's Stone. Arthur's Stone is an ancient and mysterious Neolithic burial site located high above the Golden Valley in Herefordshire, England. Old stones that were left behind by the early Neolithic people of Britain thousands of years ago were discovered up on the hill, and in the distance rises the beautiful Black Mountains of Wales. Archaeologists have been digging at the site for years, but in their most recent season they found some truly fascinating things. It was here that archaeologists unearthed the steps leading to a 5,000-year-old tomb. They also uncovered primitive tools that were likely created by the first humans to ever farm this part of Britain. The research team used drones to pinpoint nearby burial spots in the general vicinity of Arthur's Stone. They believe this site was a lot like Stonehenge in the past. an important meeting place and the center of a ritualistic community of Neolithic farmers. Archaeology professor Julian Thomas called it one of the most wonderful yet poorly understood ancient monuments in Britain. The reason it's called Arthur's Stone is because of the legend that connects it with the mythical King Arthur. According to legends, Arthur supposedly killed a giant on the very spot where the tomb is today. Indentations on the tomb's capstone were allegedly made by the giant's elbows as it toppled over. And while we can't say whether that truly happened or not, the tomb itself is real enough. Scientists say Arthur's Stone was occupied by the very last hunter-gatherers as they made the transition to a life of farming. Number 5. The Laguna Copper Plate Inscription. The Laguna Copper Plate Inscription is a legal document that dates back all the way to 900 AD and is the earliest known written document in the Philippines. During the 10th century, scholars generally believed the Philippines were isolated from most of Southeast Asia. There was the Khmer Empire, which controlled the mainland, and the seas were mostly controlled by the Srivijaya, a maritime empire in the region. There were others, but we don't have enough time in this video. But there was no mention of the Philippines until the Laguna Copper Plate Inscription, or LCI for short. The LCI was the one artifact found that made scholars re-evaluate the relationship between the Philippines and the rest of Asia. It reveals the influence of Hindu culture and names several towns and indicates there were interactions between the islands and the empire way before we originally thought. The copper plate was found during a dredging project by a laborer. Even though he tried to sell it several times, no one seemed to care until finally the Philippine National Museum finally bought it and an anthropologist started to translate. There are supposed to be more of these copper plates that were lost. So if you are in the Philippines, keep an eye out. Number 4. Rat-eating pitcher plant. What could be cooler than a carnivorous jungle plant? Scientists recently discovered this new species of pitcher plant on the face of Mount Victoria in the Philippines. It also happens to be one of the largest carnivorous plants ever discovered, with a big bowl of death. It has been named Nepenthes attenborough after the famous naturalist and TV personality Sir David Attenborough. As you can tell from the name, it specializes in rats. The plant can lure these rats in with their sweet nectar scent, and when the rat comes near enough to drink the plant's liquid, it gets stuck in the gooey sap instead. Once the rat is trapped, acid-like digestive enzymes break down the rat slowly to be consumed by the plant. It's like a monster out of a horror story, and it's just as gruesome as it sounds. Just another example that nature is pretty scary. Number 3. Skeleton in the driveway. A man named Bertie Curry was doing some work on his land where he owned a bar in Northern Ireland. He was trying to make a driveway, but instead found himself looking at some human bones. He immediately called the police, and they were able to determine that luckily, he wasn't sitting on a murder scene because the bones were much older. Archaeologists were called in and they found something they didn't expect. The bones that Curry had found were extremely old. In fact, they were older than the Celts that had landed in Ireland over 1,000 years ago, if not more. Why is this significant? Well, common belief is that the original Celts made it to Ireland from Britain between 1000 and 500 BC. But the bones found were from around 2000 BC, which changes the history of the nations in many ways. This has caused many people to argue about what the finding of these bones actually means. Does this mean that the first inhabitants weren't from Britain? Are our timetables all wrong? What is the story behind this person? Until other similar remains are found, it is very hard to tell. Number 2. Rat Kings. The Rat Kings are a rare phenomenon from the animal kingdom that is so bizarre, no one is entirely sure how it happens. You may have seen one before, but if you haven't, they really are something quite unusual. They have been a part of legend for centuries and are formed when a number of rats become attached by the tail. This is actually a real thing. With all these tails becoming entangled, the rats lose their ability to move independently and die a slow and painful death. It's not really a royal king-like event, but more like a ball of complete suffering. This only happens with one species, the black rat, but apparently it sometimes happens with other animals, such as squirrels. Despite being written about a lot, only a few examples have ever been found. Science can't explain this though, because the behavior or the tail entanglement has never been documented in rats. Perhaps it's a birth defect, or something that happens in cold temperatures to share warmth. Other possibilities are that it happens due to adhesive liquids, or a sticky substance formed by a rat's skin. In any case, it makes no sense. Number 1. The Ulf Beared Swords. Ulf Beared Swords were the weapon of choice of the Vikings, along with other tribes around northern Europe. They had a long, double-edged blade and a straight crossbar over the grip. There are only about 170 still known to exist today, each of which dates to between the 9th and 11th centuries. And the cool thing is, they have the telltale inscription in the blade itself. Said to be stronger, sharper, and better than any other sword at the time, they were owned by the wealthier members of society and came with a hefty price tag, about the equivalent of up to $24,000 in today's prices. The name itself of Ulfbeard is a form of early trademark, signaling that the sword was made in a certain way. Interestingly, they were all formed with varying methods, but the most surprising thing about them is the composition of the metal. The trick to making a good sword is perfecting the amount of carbon in the blade. If there is too much carbon mixed with the iron, the swords will break, but not adding enough meant the sword would bend. The Ulf Beared Swords were the perfect blend, and it's not entirely clear how they managed this. It truly was a science hundreds of years ahead of its time, and it was only until the Industrial Revolution came around that it could be replicated. To this day, by using the production methods that they had at the time, no one knows how the Ulfbeard blacksmiths were able to craft such impressive weapons. Thanks for watching! Would you rather discover an ancient Egyptian tomb or a completely new animal species? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!